I know a lot of us didn't really think about the voices behind cartoon characters. Our feeble child brain just couldn't process the idea of your favorite characters being voiced by the guy your mom makes you hold hands with at church. Like you probably had no idea that Ben from the 90 It's movie voiced Emily Elizabeth's furry buddy Clifford. Imagine the head honchos at PBS Kids watching the Stephen King flick and going, yep, that's our dog. But we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. For those who aren't familiar with this colossal canine, Clifford the Big Red Dog started off as children's books published in 1963. While my mom always said don't judge a book by its cover, it's easy to deduce that these books are about a big-ass dog with a whole lot of heart. Clifford is a friend to all, especially his owner, Emily Elizabeth. And let's not forget about Chloe the Brains and her chunky chum T-Bone, two of Clifford's best friends. Oh, and there's Mac. Clifford always helping out others in his numerous adventures throughout Bridwell Island. Whether it be the circus, the fire department, Hanukkah, Norman Bridwell, the author and illustrator of the books, wanted Clifford to be your normal dog that just so happened to be big. Meaning Clifford didn't have any crazy adventures like going into space or traveling into another dimension. Instead, Clifford went on adventures your 6-year-old bull terrier would get into. Having over 120 million books sold, an Emmy Award television series, and a balloon during the Macy's Day Parade that ran from 1990 to 1996, and brought back later to 2000 to 2004. Yeah, this month meant business, but Norman Bridwell never expected his red dog to get so big. When Bridwell was a kid, his art and writing wasn't really given much thought by his teachers. His teachers would often prefer someone else's work over his. No one back then could really fathom that he will one day be responsible for a successful series of children's books. Norman Bridwell's interest in writing books for children came from him needing more income to support his wife, Norma Bridwell, and his daughter Emily Elizabeth Bridwell. Yeah, that Emily Elizabeth. Bridwell decided to make a portfolio of his work, and send them to 15 children's book publishers, to hopefully find a job. Unfortunately, Bridwell was rejected by all of them. Adding salt to the wound, one editor from Harper & Row told Bridwell that his art wasn't good enough, and that no one would want him to illustrate a book for them.
And one of the paintings I did was of a little girl with a great big red dog. And I took these samples around, I showed them to a lot of people, and I got rejected every place I went. Nobody liked the art. And one lady at one of the publishing houses said, well, you're not very good. Nobody would ever want you to illustrate a book.
That's pretty harsh and probably would crush anyone's spirit. But what the editor did afterwards would change Bridwell's life for the better. She picked one of Bridwell's sketches that showed a baby girl and a horse-sized bloodhound and told him, there might be a story in this one.
She said, why don't you try writing a story? And she said, maybe this is a story here. And she pointed to the picture of the little girl with the big red dog.
Norman took that drawing and decided to make the pooch more canine-like and a bit bigger. Bridwell thought that Tiny would be a good name for his creation, but his wife thought the name was too obvious and stupid, suggesting the dog to be called Clifford instead, the name coming from her childhood imaginary friend. The name Clifford stuck, and Bridwell dropped his manuscript and drawings to Scholastics. 3 weeks later, Bridwell got a call back from Scholastics, saying that they wanted to publish his work. Now, you'd think Bridwell will have his paws in the air after hearing the good news, but he just thought of it as a fluke, getting his work published as a one-hit wonder. But lo and behold, he couldn't be any further from the truth. The first Clifford book came, and the rest is history. When you think of icons for children's books, Clifford is probably the first thing that comes to mind, along with Arthur. You couldn't go to school without seeing both of these books in every classroom. I swear to God, there were like 10 Clifford and 7 Arthur books in my elementary class. It's kind of funny looking back at it. Clifford is big, we all get it at this point, but why? Well, he's a kind-carrying giant that's always ready to make new friends. Plus, the books and show taught children that it was okay to make mistakes. And the most important thing to do is learn from them, and to also forgive others and yourself. Clifford's message was always to be loving and caring, and that connected well with children.
Clifford, T-Bone and I already did make up.
Then we're friends again.
You were right, Clifford. If we were gonna stop being friends just because of an old bone, then we weren't very good friends.
So with anything that sticks with kids, you gotta have a movie that capitalized on the craze. This is where Clifford's really big movie comes in. A film from Warner Bros. That was released in theaters on February 20th, 2004. You think all this talk about this son of a bitch would make you think that kids were lining up in theaters waiting to see this movie? Well, you're wrong. The film only made $3 million. This big red movie was a big red flop. Yeah, most movies for mouth-breathing toddlers are a financial failure. I know some of these movies hold a special place in your heart, but if you think your dad's going to drive you to AMC to watch Oogie Loves and the Big Balloon Adventure, then I don't know what to tell you. Your parents aren't gonna watch something for big dumb babies unless the movie is about big dumb babies. I'm the only kid that watched this movie, and that was only on DVD. This was one of the movies I watched and repeat as a kid, and if I can go back in time and give you my thoughts on the film, I would go, Clifford is really cool, but the cow's annoying. Surprisingly, not much has changed. But before we talk about the story, I think the visuals are worth bringing up first. The visuals are a huge step from the television series, with the characters popping out of the background and colors changing based on the movie's tone and lighting. Because the movie uses actual pupils versus the dotted ones from the show, everyone is more expressive this time around. As for animation, there's nothing crazy going on screen, but what we get looks pretty nice. The animation is pretty smooth all around, and the characters look how they're supposed to. Everything looks good for the most part, but like a tick on a dog's back, the CG in the film is irritating. You can definitely see the animators cut corners when it comes to blending the CG and hand-drawn animations seamlessly together. I mean, just look at this car, it looks like something from an early PC game. I like the way this movie looks, capturing the simplicity and charm of the books and show. But the CG is just too sloppy to ignore. Now that we got the visuals and animations out of the way, let's look at the plot. But first things first, have you ever heard of Tummy Yummies? If you haven't, they're like Scooby snacks, but for Clifford. Clifford shouts down on them like there's no tomorrow. I know some say it's the love for Clifford that got him so big, but I think those Tummy Yummies might be the real culprit. Anyways, the neighbor, Mr. Blinkman, takes note of Clifford's big appetite, telling Emily parents, the Howards, that Clifford just eats too much of that stuff, saying that Clifford would probably eat them out of the house by the amount of food he scarfs down. Clifford overhears this conversation. I mean, with ears like those, of course he does. Do you know how good dog ears are? They're about 4 times better than human ears. Anyways, Clifford hears that he might be a financial problem to the Howards, and decides to run away to the circus. The circus taking part in a competition hosted by the CEO of Tummy Yummies, where the grand prize is fame, fortune, and a lifetime supply of, you guessed it, Tummy Yummies. So Clifford joins the circus to hopefully win the Tummy Yummies and help the Howards out of their financial debt. We later find out though that the Howards aren't really in any financial problems. Even if they were, they consider Clifford as part of the family, so that means they don't see him as some sort of parasite. They love Clifford, and Clifford loves them. So this is what the plot boils down to. Clifford needs to stop seeing himself as a burden. Though Clifford thinks he is, the people that love him believe otherwise. I like this plot, and I wanted to see how Clifford's journey will change his perception of himself. But unfortunately, we don't get that. Throughout the entire movie, Clifford's eternal conflict doesn't get resolved. Not at the circus, not when he gets captured by the evil Tummy Yummy agency, and not even towards the end of the film. Clifford's main conflict is put on hold and is never addressed again in the film. We actually get more character development from a secondary character, Shackleford the Ferret. His shtick is that he wants to push the animals to their limits to win the competition. Them winning the competition will help with their struggling circus and keep them in business. All the animals stink, however, and aren't selling any tickets. This is until Clifford shows up and starts bringing in the crowds. I mean, of course he does. Any self-respecting kid will want to see a gigantic dog versus a tiny shit-pissing chihuahua.
Perdón.
So Shackleford should be happy, right? I mean, Clifford is racking in the people, which means more money for the circus. You'd think so, but no. Shackleford turns out to be jealous at Clifford for stealing the spotlight, so he decides to push him around. It's only towards the end of the film he turns a new leaf and starts liking him. Shackleford's dumb, and I want to strangle him to death. Here's this guy helping you out, and you think the best thing to do is be a jerk to him? Look, Shackleford thinks that Clifford is there for glory and the prize. He sees Clifford as someone that only cares for himself. But as you can see, that couldn't be any further from the truth. Clifford is kind and caring to all the circus members, including Shackleford. This is the movie's problem. It sets up 2 main plots that both fall flat. Clifford's story doesn't have a conclusion, and Shackleford's issue has a flaw. I wouldn't go as far and say Shackleford's jealousy should be taken out of the story. I just think it should have been resolved in the middle, so that both him and Clifford can start working together. Them working together could have set up to them learning that family comes first above all else, which is what Clifford's main conflict is. They could have killed 2 birds with 1 stone, that's what I'm saying. I can go on how this movie drops its narrative, but I don't want to put this movie in the doghouse just yet. The plot is bad, but there are other good stuff in the film. For example, the music in the movie is pretty great. The opening song is similar to the opening jingle of the TV show, which makes you feel like you're entering a children's book. And the song that plays after, called You and Me, is pretty fun and energetic, doing a great job in showing the loving relationship between Clifford and Emily Elizabeth.
You and me, tearing down the pavement, racing to catch up with no one else but.
There's another song I like, and that's Until I Go. It's played when Clifford is leaving Bridwell Island to join the circus. It's a sad song, and seeing Clifford leave the island does make me a little teary.
You got to fall off to get back on, and I can't come home till I'm gone.
But before I start sobbing like the man-child I am, here's a fun fact. The soundtrack is composed by Jody Gray, the same guy that worked with Andy Isran on music for Courage the Cowardly Dog, creating the opening and closing theme for Courage, Bridge Over the River Quack, and Freaky Fred.
I got a little naughty.
This is getting too creepy. Let's go back to You and Me, please.
You and me.
Much better. You know, now that I think about it, all the music is original, which means they didn't opt to just put Who Let the Dogs Out for the entire soundtrack. God, that would have been awful. The music is good, not gonna lie. There are some tracks I'm not a huge fan of, but the songs that are excellent are bangers for sure, and are worth the listen. You know what also sounds great? The voice acting. Because it's mostly the same guys that worked on the original show.
Can you help me get big muscles and a tough guy face, Cleo?
Of course.
Are you sure, Cleo?
Have I ever steered T-Bone wrong?
Yes.
Yes. Who has a plan?
Hello, I do, of course.
Are you sure?
Have I ever steered you wrong?
Well,
Don't answer that.
Only one character is replaced. The voice of Charlie, who was originally played by Gary Leroy Gray, is now being played by Orrin Williams. Your guess is as good as mine on why this was the case, but I'm just glad we got most of the cast for the film. John Ritter, voiced as Clifford, is nice and welcoming as ever. Cree Summer and Key Mitchell as Chloe and T-Bone just go all out in putting so much personality in their performance. Earl Bowen as Bleepman sounds like a grouch with a good heart, and Greg Griffin as Emily Elizabeth is spunky and adorable as ever. Also, Wade Brady voice as Shackelford isn't half bad. Even though I'm not a big fan of Shackelford for being an egotistic maniac that sabotages his own show, I gotta admit that Wayne Brady does a great job of portraying that type of energy into him really well.
I don't think that we particularly...
Of course we do. Between the shows, the travel, the crowds of adoring fans. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
The cast is superb because it's the same guys that worked on the show, so everyone just seems to bounce off well off each other. It's pretty weird to think of a movie that wouldn't do the same thing, not using the guys from the show for their film adaptation. It sure is a mystery on why they would do that. There's this one sound effect used for every character jumping on Clifford. It's pretty funny. I mean, it sounds like there's so much force behind their jump that they could probably leap all the way to the moon if they wanted to. Overall, this movie was okay. Not great since it was lacking in the story department, but in the music and visuals, this movie did a good job. This movie isn't the worst, but if it was reworked on, it could have been fantastic. This sucks giving this movie a low review because when doing research for this video, I found out what made Clifford so special. Clifford is friendly, relatable, clumsy, and forgiving. He also saved us from the clutches of anime.
Ironically, when we decided to do Clifford was a moment in time where kids' television became very edgy. It had a lot of influence from anime, from Japan.
Even though the movie wasn't all that great, it reminded me of how much I love PBS shows, and how they were an important part of my childhood. These shows really meant a lot to me as a kid, and I can't forget the memories I had watching them, giving me that warm feeling that I couldn't get anywhere else. I love Clifford the Big Red Dog, and I love PBS. I guess that's why I watch this movie from time to time, because even with all its faults, it still holds that Clifford charm that I know all too well. Clifford is a friend, and there's no way I'll ever forget that. But what are your thoughts on the Clifford movie? What do you think about the new Clifford movie that we're about to get? Leave your thoughts down below. Me, personally, I don't think much about it, but I'm willing to give it a shot if I find it interesting, so there's that. So yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.